Angelina, this is your project, ResiPod, right?
Yes, ResiPod is an affordable, sustainable housing innovation that I created to tackle Australia's housing crisis.
The housing crisis.
Yes.
Could you pick a bigger problem to address? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
So what's the particular angle you're taking here on the housing crisis?
So the housing crisis for me is deeply personal because as a young Australian myself, I am faced with the issue where when I turn 34 to 40, that will be the time that I am financially able to afford my own home.
Right.
And realistically, that's not viable for me or any other young Australian, in fact.
Yeah.
So that's the main problem surrounding ResiPod.
So you've been thinking about this for a very long time, or is this a really sort of immediate reaction to the housing crisis conversation?
Well, for me, I've been brought up in a family where housing, innovation, housing in general was always a topic of discussion.
All right. You had to take a particular stance as a young person.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So is it that first home that seems to be like the issue
Yes.
you're trying to address?
Exactly, being able to afford our first home as
Right.
young Australians.
So how does ResiPod solve that problem?
So ResiPod is a scalable, affordable housing design which is made in a modular factory setting and constructed on site within a day.
Within a day?
Within a day,
Okay.
yes. Everything's streamlined, everything's basically centered around the idea that construction costs and labour costs are cut to a minimal
Yep.
so that the prices in fact aren't inflated.
Okay, so there's the price issue and the speed that you're talking about, the
Yes.
efficiency there. Anything else that's sort of on your mind in terms of design
Yes.
parameters here?
The housing industry being the leading cause of landfill just wasn't a good thing for our environment.
All of that construction waste.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. The offcuts, nothing being recycled or nothing being reused.
Yeah, yeah.
So I sort of played on the modular housing concept
Right.
where offcuts were reduced to a minimal, everything's streamlined, and we know exactly how many materials we need within this sort of controlled factory environment.
Perfect. So you've got a very efficient, very sustainable,
Yes.
and very compact looking housing solution here.
Yes.
I've got a colleague, Brooke Jackson, from the School of Architecture here at UTS, who's an expert in multi-unit residential. She happens to be here with us today. Brooke, come and join Angelina and I.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anthony. Lovely to meet you, Angelina.
Nice to meet you too.
Looking over this project, I just wanted to also say it's fantastic to see innovation coming from the new wave of people that this is going to be impacting most.
Thank you.
So what I'd really like to know is, how does this whole thing work?
So there is a frame that is constructed on site. It's transported via trucks on site onto the plot of land. And then we have the pods that are created within a modular factory setting. And once these are created, they're also transported via crane and via truck onto the plot of land once the frame has been basically established on the plot of land. And what the sort of innovative aspect that I came up with is, the pods can slide into the frame and say, for example, person A up at the top of the frame wants to move out. It doesn't disrupt or affect any other residents living within this ResiPod unit.
Fantastic. It sounds as though it's really highly flexible and potentially
Yes.
can adapt to and be scalable
Yes.
to any location which
Yes.
these things want to pop up. When you were imagining these spaces, what were you thinking about in terms of actually living in these pods?
It sort of began in a subjective light where I was looking at the aesthetics, the functionality that I would want, but then I sort of had to deviate from that. I had to construct lots of surveys, ask lots of people what they would be interested in, what they would like to live in, and that sort of gave me an objective scope of what a house would be like that someone would want to live in.
That is so important, to be thinking about the lived experience of how people are reflecting on how they're living and to be able to innovate on those things.
Yes.
Now, how much do you know about all the details around legislation and standards and codes when it came to designing this thing?
I'm a bit of a legal nerd. So I decided to look into sort of the legal spectrum of ResiPod, what it would classify as, what the building and structural requirements are, and it's classified as a Class 2 structure. So this was a little bit of a challenge to start off with because I had to reduce the scale of my project, where originally I thought, why don't I create it with 8 or 10 different pods, make it a little bit larger, but because it does classify as that Class 2 structure, I needed to make sure that the structure here had enough car parking spaces to fit that Class 2 requirement. I needed to make sure that the fire safety requirements were all up in check. I needed to also just put some implementation surrounding the way cranes could access on and off the structure. So that sort of limited the scope and the size of my structure in general.
Can you give us a little demonstration of how the whole thing slides in and out?
Sure thing. So this is the frame right here, and then this is the pod.
Yeah.
It slides out like this, and then it comes straight back in.
So effectively, I could be living in a ResiPod for a year, let's say.
Yes.
Decide it's time to move. I can take the pod out and take it with me.
Yes.
Someone else can come in with their own version and slide right on in.
And the good thing about this is, once you're sort of done living in your pod, it goes straight back to the factory. It's refurbished, recycled, reused. It can go to another person, it can go back to yourself in a different plot of land, but that sort of plays into the sort of sustainability that I was talking about before.
So Angelina, what was it like getting feedback, and who did you go to and turn to, and what were some of the developments that came out of that feedback for you?
So for me, I sought feedback from industry experts. I took the time outside of class to go email architects, email engineers, sort of get that industry expertise and advice from people who were knowledgeable in the different fields that sort of surrounded ResiPod. I'd say the best feedback that I received was getting a structural analysis from an engineer, and that sort of confirmed for me that ResiPod was in the right direction. It was able to be implemented into Australian society. It was sturdy enough, and there was nothing structurally wrong with the entire design.
You must have done a lot of prototypes along the way here. Yeah, so how did you go about that process of iterating the design over and over? What number of design is this one?
So, the final prototype there is the 5th prototype.
So
I did 5 in general. This was actually the first prototype. I just wanted to get sort of the foundation of the sliding and track mechanism in place. The first prototype was definitely a big fail.
Okay.
Yes, but it was a learning experience for me, and I got to sort of reinvent my ArchiCAD and my renders.
What's the absolute best thing in your mind about ResiPod?
Well, there's lots of little things that I do like about it, but if I had to put my finger on it, I'd say the actual innovation itself.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the prototypes I've created or the Lumion renders or even the 3D printing that I spent a lot of time on. I just think the idea itself, the whole sliding mechanism, how it incorporates a system, an environment, and an innovation in general, just the idea that it's able to be implemented into Australian society and I can actually see it through. I can see people living in it, and I can see myself living in it as well.
Yeah.
That's probably the thing that strikes me the most, the thing that I'm most proud of.
That is perfect. Brooke, I think we have someone here who's thinking big.
I think so indeed, absolutely. Solving one crisis, one pop at a time.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Brooke, do you think we're seeing the future of Australian housing over here?
I think there's a strategy that could be deployed quite successfully, and I particularly love the fact that your home can move with you.
Yes.
And I guess what's next is, can you start to expand and contract your home depending on your life cycle? Because we know that our families ebb and flow throughout a lifetime. I think there's so much potential here.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Angelina, well done. It's a great project, and I love the fact that you've addressed a really big problem. You've been fearless about doing it. You've done your research, you've gone in all sorts of directions, but the design sort of speaks for itself.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.